Welcome to the Vernacular, a podcast for MSPs. We're your hosts, Vernon Harrison and Dori Spade.
Hi, as Vernon said, I'm Dori Spade, a 17-year MSP veteran. Today, I help other MSPs grow through developing frameworks from sales to service delivery that increase sales conversion rates and increase customer retention. And I'm really excited to be working today with Vernon.
Hi, I'm Vernon Harrison, and I'm a three-time MSP owner. I escaped, but I keep getting sucked back in. And I currently own a company called CRO Leader. It is about helping MSPs grow their business. I'm also author of the book, The MSP Owner's Manual, a complete guide to sales growth. All right, welcome to episode 1. Dori, I am so excited to be here with you. Let me give everyone a little background here. We won't bore you to death, but I was being pushed by my team because we both own consulting firms to do a podcast, because that's what you young kids want. And I'm excited to be doing it. But I didn't want just the sound of my own voice. And I thought of somebody who I occasionally have been bumping into in the industry, and that is Dori Spade. And I'm excited to have her with me. And we're hoping between the two of us, we are truly co-hosts, that we can create some short podcasts that you can listen into from time to time and maybe get a little help for your MSP. Make it a little better, make it a lot better. But at the end of the day, you should find at a minimum some empathy. Want to add to that, Dori?
Vernon, as I said, my work starts from the sales framework, but with qualified leads. But I'm really excited to work with you today and throughout this podcast because nothing happens without lead generation. And I know that's just one of your areas of expertise. So I'm really excited to have the opportunity to put the two together to make a really consistent winning formula for the MSPs out there that we both know are working super hard every single day.
And that's a great point, calling out some of the things that we're actually good at. But at the end of the day, too, for those of you who are listening and, have access to where this is going to be posted or hosted or whatever, please tell us if we're not the subject matters experts on it, or if we don't think we have a strong enough opinion, or more importantly, if you don't think we have strong enough opinion about it, we'll try to go get that answered for you. What we want to be here is completely independent, and we want to help you. And I think one of the great things about an opportunity like this to do a podcast is you get to sit in your car, or you get to sit in your headphones and maintain your anonymity. All right. So without maybe not the embarrassment of not knowing what CRM stands for or PSA stands for, right? Or any other of the millions of acronyms. So that's what we're here about. And so in our first episode, I would actually like to talk about some of the areas, and I made some notes, Dori, I don't know if you did, where we could turn around and maybe then make a podcast list. So for our next episode, we'll be far more focused. And one of the top things that I had on my list was leadership. Many of you are MSP owners. When I started my first one, I was very, very young, and I was very good at fixing things. I knew nothing of business. I knew nothing of management. I had never had an employee before, but I was really good at fixing things. So people started bringing things to me, and I got overwhelmed trying to manage them myself, and my first MSP was born. And from that, I can share experiences about what happens when you don't pay your payroll taxes and things like that. And/or if you catch an employee stealing. It is a place that I truly grew up. I went to engineering school. But after I started my business, I went back to school and studied business law, and business marketing. So, as we say up here in Boston. So leadership is one of the things I hope we do an episode on. How about you, Dori? You got a particular subject that you want to add to the list?
I think the main thing of how I like to approach the different subjects is how you do something, not as much what the leader does or what the services or techs or wherever they're standing, the sales folks, but how are they doing it? I think that's a huge differentiator. So Vernon, when you bring to this podcast your expertise and your experience as an MSP leader, my goal is to drill it down a little further and tell our audience about how they can accomplish these goals as well. And to your point about, our MSP leaders not always having a business background, but rather a technical background. I find leaders in a couple of different areas today. One is they have no business background, or the other is they do have a business background, they're doing a good job, but they're very insulated within their small or medium-sized MSP. So it's great to have that outside input on what the rest of the MSP community is doing, how, what the success looks like, especially in 2025 and going forward.
So that's interesting. And a short podcast, right now we're going to start bi-weekly or weekly until we feel like we've hit a rhythm where we're bringing value. But as I listen to you say that, I have this sense that you and I both, when being approached by a new prospect or going into a new client, so Dori, as we go through this episode and make a list of some of the things we want to do, I started with leadership. You started about how we're going to have a how-to approach. I mean, we can't have an episode on marketing. We have to have several, right? It's about websites. It's about CRMs. We can't have an episode on sales. It's a million of them, and we can talk about, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your input on process and structure. And again, some of the how-to things within the team. We can have conversations because we've both been employees and employers at different times, and so what do you do? I mentioned in my opening statement about what to do when you catch an employee stealing. And by the way, the lesson on that one was when consulting, somebody says fire for coming in late because, if you can't prove it, she's going to own you. Right. So, and just things like that, as frustrated as I was. So my question is, Dori, to get a better perspective on some of the things that you offer, some of your engagements, I'm wondering, what is the one of the more common things? I don't want to necessarily the number one thing, but what are some of the common things that when you're going into a new client or have a new prospect that you're going to discuss and maybe make suggestion on? And I'm not asking for the suggestions. I'm asking for the subject. What is it?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a great question, Vernon. And one thing that I see very frequently in the MSPs that I'm working with is the silos between the different departments, if you will, or different teams. So sales to service delivery silos, service delivery to customer success silos. And, it's really something that if they have a workflow that brings them together, that what they can accomplish is so much greater than having the siloed teams. And that's, like I said, that's something that's super common that I will work on with MSPs. And it makes it much more fun when the employees know that they have this opportunity to work together with their teammates, and they're not always having this push and pull type of work day every day. So that's one of the most common ones.
So let me ask you a question about that. When you're starting out, do you think they know it and they just need it defined? Do you think they know it and they just haven't figured out how to overcome the challenge? Or do you find out that, that it's almost deliberate? No, we do this over here and we do that over there. What's that typically? What's the typical response? Emotionally, not intelligently, right? So as to when because I think we see silos in a lot of companies, right? And so, but and again, sometimes they're there. Leave the guys in shipping alone, right? So
when it comes to the silos within teams, I will often know from the people within the organization that these silos exist. They'll express them maybe a little bit differently, like, we don't have good communication, and sales sells stuff that, wasn't scoped out correctly because we're not engaged enough. So they will express those concerns. But from the leadership perspective, where there may be silos that aren't horizontal, but more vertical, they may not always be aware that they're not getting the most out of their people that they could by tapping in and breaking down those silos within the levels of the organization, not just across teams.
That makes so much sense too, because most of our clients are not massive companies. And, in fact, I love the smaller MSPs in helping them go to the next level. And most of them, you can't have a not my job mentality, which can lead to silos, I would assume. But again, if you're the bookkeeper at a small MSP, chances are you're also answering the phone, and maybe occasionally you even have to pack something up for shipping, right? And although those are sort of obvious boundaries, I understand what you're talking about, like between different divisions, like between marketing and between sales, and again between leadership. Who hears from their owner, who hears from their CEO, who needs to, right? In fact, early on, and again, when I was a rookie and didn't know what I was doing, I had hired a business consultant who came in, and he said to me, he says, Vernon, he said, I said to him, I said, what are you going to do for me? And he goes, well, we'll see. But he goes, the first day, and this will tell you how dated it is. What I would like to do is I'm going to say we're going out for lunch, but I'm going to come early by mistake, and I'm going to sit in the corner and pretend I'm reading the newspaper. And I'm going to just kind of see what goes on in your office. And I was like, okay. And by the way, he did a really good job pretending he was reading the paper, because I thought he was just sitting there reading the paper. But then when we, went to lunch, there was a couple of things that he said to me. And by the way, this was in the 80s. Tell you how old the story is, but how impactful it was for me. And I'm so glad that I remember it. The first thing he said to me is, he says, Vernon, he says, your people love you. He said, they really do. And I said, well, thanks, Dick. His name was Richard. I said, yeah, thanks, Dick, and Dick Heron, and shout out. And but he goes, but that doesn't mean they should be on payroll. I was like, ouch, and then, and another thing is, he says, oh, and by the way, he goes, your people ask a lot of dumb questions. And he goes, I would never say that in front of them. He goes, but man, they ask a lot of dumb questions. And I was a little, pun intended, I guess, dumbfounded by that. And he mentioned to me that, he said, the reason they do is because they like your attention. And the reason they do is because they love you. And he goes, but the number one reason is because you answer dumb questions,
Wow.
So it's sort of fun, and so I realized it, and I'm a bit of a sarcastic person, but I had a very small, I would say 1,000 square foot office, and somebody would come and ask where the broom was, and I would tell them, and so I learned from him that when somebody comes and asks for the broom, to say, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm really focused on something right now. Can you go find it yourself? Right. And, but it was interesting, almost like our kids, right. Just wanting our attention, but from a communication standpoint, my silos weren't siloed enough in that scenario. But so let me ask you some more questions, Dori. Not that I want to turn this an interview for you, but I like what I've learned so far, because again, I have heard you speak, ask questions at various events that we find ourselves, and I thought to myself, hey, let's see if Dori will join you. And again, I'm asking you, publicly on the podcast, to bring your opinion, and don't be afraid to say, look, I'm not an expert on that, but I have an opinion, right? By the way, we will never talk politics on this show, ever, 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 because we don't want any of you to go away forever. So from that structure standpoint, do you have a typical org chart, or what do I want to say, an ideal org chart or a dream org chart for most organizations that you could lay out, where budget was no obstacle, a number of people where you could say, everybody needs one of these and not one of those. Do you have something like that, or is that something you think about?
I have developed org charts for, I'll say more mid-size. I don't really know how to define the size of MSPs anymore, but saying about a $5 million a year MSP is somewhat mid-size. I'm not sure if that's accurate or not, but I have developed an org chart where we looked at phase 1 of growth, phase 2 of growth, and phase 3, going from like the 5 to the 7 to the 10 million in revenue goal over a 3 to 5 year plan. And in there, I did develop where I thought they should hire the project manager, the security specialist. I did do that. But the other area is a little more granular, which is developing the dream team within the team that they already
Sure.
have
Oh,
and
okay.
starting
Okay.
there.
Okay.
So the
Right.
dream team is the team that, remember, my whole focus is increasing sales conversion ratios and customer success. So we have to have a dream team that goes from qualified leads. How do you turn them into converted sales? So the dream team isn't just a sales team. It's an executive sponsor. It's, a technical leader, maybe a security leader, depending on the resources that the client has. I'm a big believer of we start out where you are. I don't go in and say, to be successful, you have to hire this role and that role. We got to start
Sure.
out where
That
they are.
is, by the way, that is a great, great, great point. You start where you are. Somebody once asked me too the same thing. They say, "What can you do for me?" And I say the same thing. I said, I don't do the same two things for anybody. I have formulas, I have processes, right? To use your vernacular, I have my dream teams. I have charts of duties and responsibilities charts. So I like to make a duties and responsibilities chart with sort of a reporting tree. And then we kind of figure out, who can do that, because sometimes in the smaller companies, like I say, the person has, it doesn't flow in the org chart. Somebody's got 7 jobs, right, by description under there. But you're right, it starts where they are. Now, by the way, you also said something earlier about, I don't know what a mid-size one. Dori, this is our podcast. We can call it whatever we want. Okay, but I'm sort
So
of
I'm making up stuff as I go. No, I'm
Oh
kidding
yeah,
about the size. I would
absolutely.
say
Thank
this.
goodness. I mean, yeah. How are we going to brand this if we don't? Right now. So interesting note. I have found, that when I engage MSPs and again, sort of tossing numbers around, I often think of a lot almost like my MSPs do clients. Number of employees is sort of a reflection too. But you're right. The guy who's doing 5 million seems to struggle to get to 20. But the difference between a $5 million MSP and a $20 million MSP is significant. And to your point, and to what I'm starting to garnish as one of your great values, is process is so important for being successful and being profitable at that, right? So and so whether it's converting sales or I think you mentioned client success or client satisfaction, right?
Client success processes too, yes.
Yeah,
But
and by the
Vernon,
way, all
if
within that too, right? What about happy teams? Is that something
it's
that you
hugely
see?
important.
Okay.
It's hugely important. And that's where we go to breaking down silos, because people generally want to work well with each other. But if they don't have a formula or a framework or a workflow for that success, they don't know how. So that's a huge part of it. But none of my work can be successful without the marketing and lead gen arm of it. So who are the MSPs that are bringing you in? Why, what is it that you are bringing to them that they say, Vernon, I need to work with you?
Great question. In the industry, there's some great companies, which I will not mention by name, that are lead generation companies, marketing firms that many in the industry have used and have had mixed results. And so a lot of them, a lot of the MSPs I look with are really in the initial stages. They don't understand, what it takes to bring in business outside of referrals. In fact, I think we should consider our actual next episode is discussing our next podcast, if it's okay with you. I would love to just stay focused on how MSPs get new clients, not the process, not the how-to that we'll drill down in, because that will be 7 episodes, but what we witness, what you witness, and what I witness. And so I find a lot of them, they're coming to me because they're struggling with that. And, some of them have gone out and, think the answer is to hire a sales professional or hire a marketing professional. And it's just part of the equation, because the reality is they also have to lead that, right? Even within my own company, and not that it's very comforting when I'm firing a sales professional, but I tell them that I failed them because I didn't give them an environment that they could succeed in. Now, in some of those cases, I'm not convinced that person could succeed in any sales environment, but simultaneously, I have worked with MSPs where I've said to the sales professional, there's not enough here for you, but you should not give up on this. You should go work for a larger MSP that might have some more degree of lead gen and event participation. So it's really about something you said earlier too, the size that fits all. So many come to me. My book is about sales growth. Just a quick sidebar is I started my second MSP while I had a full-time job. I wanted to move to Florida, or I still do. By the way, for those of you who this is being our first episode, Dori and I both are outside of Boston. I am dying
They
to
can
become
tell by your accent, but not
well, that's
mine.
for sure. Well, and Dori, just so you know, I really want to become a snowbird, right? So, but anyway, so I started an MSP down in Florida while I had a full-time job because my wife had agreed to move there, and that was before her career took a turn where we couldn't. But in any case, I built that MSP strictly on my sales skills. Okay, and my sales process skills and my marketing skills. That the first one was built on my technical skills, which many of your MSPs exist, and I had a great deal. I got lucky. By the way, anybody who tells you there's no luck involved with sales, it is a numbers game. It is an effort game. But at the end of the day, standing at the right place, finding the right client can change your life. Many of you who own an MSP out there, you have a key client that you have a strong relationship with, and it's the foundation of your company. And God forbid you should lose that client or it be acquired by somebody. And so that's why we're here. This is why both of us are here to help you to create the independence in your company where you're not reliant on one particular client. So I really help the smaller guys go to next level. I help the mid-sized guys, to your point around, fill in, I don't want to create silos, but, sort of the buckets, right? Of, when do I need lead gen? When do I need marketing? When do I get away from the cookie cutter website, right? And things like that. So I think what we'll do is we'll take our next episode and let's you and I give you something to think about before we get back here in the studio, about how we see our clients get new customers. All right. And since we're not live, if any of you have listened to this and you want to use the contact information in the show notes, please don't be afraid to share your stories. Tell you a little more about where the podcast is going to go. By the way, at the beginning of the podcast, somebody should have said, by the way, silence your phones. Did you hear my phone ring there?
I did not.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. All right, as I wind down our first episode, Dori, it's really nice to, Dori and I have never hung out. And so we're hanging out, hoping that our friendship and our intelligence bring value here today. But one of the things that we did talk about is we have 3 general directions we'd like to see this podcast go. One is that it's empathetic, and it's a place where you can come to listen and just maybe get a little better. But we're also going to have some educational series. So if we're doing something very specific to Dori's earlier point on the how to, we'll actually do an educational podcast, which almost would be reflective of a webinar. There might even be slides. So some of the educational ones, I'm more inclined to tell you that you might want to have to go watch the video. All of these are being videoed. So if you want to see what we look like, Dori is definitely the prettier one. I'm telling you now. I don't want to disappoint you. No, but so we're going to go with an educational series. We hope to be helpful, drill down into subjects. At some point, too, we hope to have many guests, MSP owners, vendors, and when we develop an audience, maybe even have an occasional call-in show where you try to challenge us, or you just tell us how lacking in skills for podcasting we have. How's that sound? Not good, right?
That would be great. We'd love to have that feedback. Another thing that I think would be really fun for our audience, Vern, is to maybe have a client of an MSP on, not to identify who the MSP is, but to talk about their care-abouts and what they find is the most important. I think it's something that I really think we need to tap into that piece of opinion as well. So maybe our audience will comment on whether they think that would be helpful.
Well, I love that idea. So, so for the most part, we're sort of podcasting here, right? We're hoping to be a little entertaining, empathetic, in discovery together, maybe offering suggestions. But we had already decided from earlier conversations that we would do something more educational and maybe even segment those episodes. But I actually like the idea of, in a sense, sort of a meet the MSP. And to your point, whether we have to put them behind the sound bubble, or they admit who they are, they aren't. But, I don't want anybody to come in here and talk about, clients they have or leads or things like that. MSPs share rooms together all the time. And so maybe we can bring them in here, and maybe they can say who they are or they're not. But at the end of the day, to your point, we can question them. Okay, so, and maybe we'll do those Meet the MSP series, and we'll sort of break that. So I like, from a category standpoint, we have our educational, and then we have our Meet the MSP, right? I think sort of a subcategory to that, which I must say is you've inspired us. We could also do something around a person who has a particular job. Hey, this is Dave. He's the marketing guy for XYZ $6 million MSP, which will remain nameless. Dave, tell us about your challenges. Tell us about your successes. We promise not to broadcast this to your competitors, but we can maybe talk to some of the people who have the job.
Can put them in shadow. That would be fun.
With the voice changer, right?
Yes.
But I mean, sometimes sharing the jobs, right? I mean, again, I don't, I love the ASCII group. I don't know if you've ever attended any of their events. And the reason I love the ASCII, reason I love the ASCII group is because of the people in the audience, the people you're sitting next to. It's a great group of MSP owners of a variety of sizes who, are coming together again for the same purpose of like this podcast, right? Now, those ASCII runs educational series, but my gosh, sometimes you just learn more at lunch than you could all day at the event. No insult to ASCII, and those great people over there.
To start by talking about what's going on in the MSP industry, expected to go on in the MSP industry in 2025, 2026, because I think that really is going to help MSPs with where they should focus or could put some of their focus. For example, there are some statistics that say that in 2024 and earlier, 20% of customers got competitive quotes when their MSP contract was getting ready to renew. And the projection for 2025 is up to like 60% are now going to get competitive quotes. So to me, that tells the MSP that they need to focus on differentiating themselves from competitors. And of course, customer satisfaction. So maybe we could start out with what's going on in the industry. There's a lot of great information out there. What would you think about that, Vern? Or would you rather just get right into the meat of it?
No, I think it makes sense, Dory. And this is a perfect example why we may be able to bring value, but just because two minds, right? Why, of course, we should start with what we think the industry looks like. And I too have some statistics on growth and needs and things like that. So episode 2 is definitely going to be about the state of the industry. So we will come prepared with some numbers, some facts. And again, any charts or numbers that you have, Dory, that you want to put in a PDF, we'll be able to distribute in our show notes. For those of you who are listening, we will respect the fact that you are just listening, and we'll try to articulate them in a way that you can visualize them if need be. But I think that, quite frankly, I think that's a great place to start. Let's talk about the industry, not to scare anybody, but, to be prepared. If we were doing this show 20 years ago, it'd be about a VAR offering services, right? And
Right.
in fact, I would like to wrap this show up by telling our audience what I believe an MSP is. An MSP basically sells 3 products. Okay, one is products themselves. I mean, it can be anything from laptops to software as a service like Office 365 or other offerings. They do project work. We need Wi-Fi in the cafeteria, right? Rewiring the new office. And they do managed services. And of course, the managed services are varying degrees. Does your definition vary from that at all?
The only thing I would add to that is most smaller customers of MSPs are also counting on the MSP to provide IT leadership, so that CIO level on a fractional basis. And I think that's very, very important to customers, because otherwise all those various areas that you mentioned, again, they become very siloed or productized, and most customers need that overarching leadership as well.
Well, Dory, I have to thank you, because I have now going to add something. I will never define an MSP without saying they also offer IT guidance. Of course they do, and it might in fact be the most important thing they do. Forget selling them laptops. Forget, bringing Wi-Fi to the cafeteria or making sure a network is monitored. You are right. It's about IT advice. Some people call it the virtual CIO or whatever. So I've learned something out of this podcast. Probably not going to help many of our listeners that we're focusing on, because they're already going, well, duh, Vernon, we already know. But again, this is sort of the value of the two.
I stated the obvious, but you'd be surprised how many MSPs don't really offer that level of leadership consistently. So that's why I bring it up.
I think we should make a commitment and a promise, Dory, to continue to and always state the obvious. Okay?
Here we go.
Right? Because, in fact, going back to my first consultant, one of the things that by the way, he, dear friend, and just helped me become so much smarter. But one of the things he said to me goes, and I'll never forget it, he goes, Vernon, even though you're paying me, he goes, the number one thing I'm going to teach you is what you already know. And I was like, what am I paying? And sometimes we, to your point about stating the obvious, in that scenario, Dory, that's exactly what you did. You reminded me of what I obviously know. Okay, but sometimes it has to be articulated. Sometimes it has to be defined. And so hopefully those of you who are listening to this first podcast will join us. For others, Dori, I'm already thrilled to be doing this with you, and I want to personally thank you for teaching me something in the first episode. I don't know if I don't know if I've returned the favor yet, but
No, absolutely, Vernon. I'm super excited, and I definitely want to hear from our audience about what topics they want to discuss and just general feedback. I'm glad I have a teammate like you who can at least bring some humor to the table here. So, and not just so serious as I am, but in any event, it's been a lot of fun, Vernon. I've enjoyed it very much, and I'm looking forward to our next episode.
All right. Well, I'm Vernon. That's Dori. And until next time, don't forget to go home and kiss your family.
Bye, everyone.